Hello, and thank you for clicking on this video. We had some technical problems during the very first half of our presentation, which we conducted at the Press Club on Monday the 26th. And so we're going to start this lecture in a hybrid format. I will introduce my part first, and then we will transition onto the recording that we have of the rest of the event. So thank you for sticking with us, and I apologize for these difficulties. And I'm really happy to introduce the project and to introduce our speakers, albeit in a hybrid format. So the title of our lecture today is the Russian arms industry that Europe built. It's tracking Europe's role in arming the Kremlin's war machine. And of course, I have to give some special thank yous already to our partner ImportGenius, the Journalism Fund, for sponsoring this resource that we will be introducing today, and the role of my colleagues at Oblique Europe, which is a newly founded not-for-profit behind this project. I would like to introduce our speakers. We have joining us after this intervention Roman Stablivsky, who is a senior analyst at the TREP Aggressor NGO, which is a project of State Watch in Ukraine. My name is Dylan Carter. I am the founder of Oblique Europe, and I'm a freelance investigative journalist. I'm working mostly on topics related to Russia, and especially the trade of machine tools to Russia from Europe. And shortly joining us will be William George, who is joining us all the way from America, coming here to Brussels. He is the head of research at ImportGenius, which is a major provider of international customs data. He will introduce to us in a little bit more about his role there. Just to start, as a real overview, a glance at the Russian arms industry, we commonly think of Russia's rearmament in the context of its aggression against Ukraine, which of course started in 2022. As we can see by the statistics showing Russia's military expenditure, it really did explode just in the follow-up to 2021. But to really understand the arms industry and how Russia is able to sustain its aggression against Ukraine, we really have to go back to 2014 when arms industry was placed under European sanctions following Russia's illegal annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. This has been a slow and steady gradual trend of military expenditure over these years. Really, Russia has been rapidly modernizing its military production capabilities since 2014. It's done this through a series of investments into its military-industrial complex, including the acquisition of Western machinery, of which we will talk slightly later. Just in statistics, after a period shortly following the European Union and international sanctions against the Russian arms industry, we did see initially many European companies divesting from the Russian arms industry, and some struggle especially in regards to the Russian currency and the Russian budget. We did see an initial dip after 2014 in military expenditure, but this soon rebounded, partly in thanks to the Western companies' renewed involvement in the Russian military sector. Defense-related manufacturing, of course, has rapidly expanded since 2021 as Russia really diverges from its civilian industry, and state investment in machinery and arms production is now a central tenet of Russia's industrial policy. Russia is now really operating on a full-scale war economy. This is partly in thanks to the investments that were made by the West since 2017 to 2022. When we think about arms factories or the arms industry in Russia, we might be tempted to reduce this down to industries such as the aerospace sector, shipbuilding, or even the manufacturing of weapons and guns, ammunition, artillery themselves. But we need to remember that the Russian arms industry is not a centralized industry. In fact, it has many, many key component parts. Among those, of course, the raw materials such as metals. We also have other types of special mechanical engineering, making things for the aerospace sector, for engine blocks, for other types of vehicles. And we even have, going down a level, of course, the manufacturing of components and circuitry, typically with foreign equipment. An important detail is all of these parts, all these constituent parts of the Russian industry rely on one type of machinery. These machines are called machine tools. To give an overview as to what a machine tool is, I'll take the straight dictionary definition. A machine tool essentially is a fixed, powerful tool, such as a lathe, which is used for cutting or shaping metal, wood, or other material. In the context of the Russian military industry, we are looking specifically at shaping metal. There are 7 primary types of machine tools. Those used for turning, where something is span and it cuts something out of a large piece of metal, but you also have things like milling, grinding, broaching, shaping, planing, boring, anything essentially that is used to shape very hard and malleable objects. Machines that can do this are absolutely essential for the Russian military industry. It is completely impossible to build an aircraft wing, gears for an engine box, ammunition, rifles without these kind of machines. But when I talk about machine tools, I also include some other type of products which kind of fall into this category, at least from the view of the international sanctions. Machine tools by themselves have, of course, got the potential to be destructive if they go into the wrong industries, but they are used quite widely in other industries as well. For example, for making cars or for construction materials or something like this. But the type of machine tools that are of the most interest are ones which are powered by something called computer numerical control, which is CNCs. Essentially, these are these machines that are guided by computers. They are given instructions which are uploaded digitally, and they will, with precision, make the cuts or the shapes or the changes to the material. Why is this really important? It somewhat removes the element of human error in making making parts or making finished products. A CNC does the job in theory perfect every time. There's no guesswork, and importantly, no shaky hands of an operator. Another thing that I include in this example of machine tools is definitely coordinate measuring machines. After you've made cuts or you've made changes to a material, you need to check it with things like X-rays or sound waves or other types of or digital cameras that can look at the material and see how it was cut or bent or worked, and check that it's accurate to the micro, so it's nanometer scale, to so much checking what we can't see with the human eye. Now, this is super important if you have a missile or an aircraft, because when that's hurtling at speed, especially flying towards Ukraine, you want it to stay together and be solid and not have any stresses or fall apart. And so these machines are extremely important for the Russian aerospace sector. We're going to talk about these machines a lot, because these are some of the machines that are considered like critical items for the Russian military industry. There are other types of machines, of course, such as non-destructive testing equipment, which also are used to inspect if there are any flaws in a piece of machinery or a piece of material. I'll move to the next slide. As you can see here on the video, I'm giving a few examples of these kind of machines in motion. In the center of the screen, you can see a CMM machine. It is analyzing the geometric qualities of something that's been manufactured by probably a CNC machine, as we see in the bottom left. So it's essentially checking that it is geometrically perfect, so that it has either the best aerodynamic properties or that it has the best strength. We see turning or milling machines in the top right, so essentially spinning a block of metal and cutting something out of it. It's used to make some very precise shapes, and precision is extremely important for the arms industry. And then we see a bunch of also other goods which would be kind of included in this machine tool category, such as robotic arms used for automating production lines, and even automated welding, as we see in the top left, which is really important for military production lines. So, why is this an interesting topic, and why have I spent the last few years researching this topic? Well, interestingly, Russia is really not capable of producing most of these machines itself. The technology behind machine tooling, especially those powered by CNC, is something that Russia just does not have domestically. There are a few producers of machine tools in Russia, but they really do not compare in quality to those made in Germany, Switzerland, South Korea, Japan, the UK, US, basically any NATO-aligned Western nation. Some more interesting statistics and an overview. 70% of all CNC machinery in Russia is imported. So, and this is the statistics as it stood before the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, of which up to 95% of the components in those were also equally imported. Now, another important statistic which isn't on the screen, according to estimates from Russian military specialists, around 80% of all the machine tools that were brought into Russia ended up in the hands of the military industry. So it's no coincidence that these items are now highly sanctioned under strict controls. They were under control since 2014, but the enforcement of this was extremely lax. Many states, these goods were considered dual use, so they were considered to have, legitimate uses, and so many shipments were allowed to pass through without customs authorities truly knowing the end user, as we're going to see in a bit. Essentially, Russia, to make almost anything in its arms industry, was extremely reliant on NATO-aligned nations for its CNC machinery. We did see after 2014 to 2016, when sanctions initially started to bite the Russian economy and enforcement was much tighter, we did see China switch towards Chinese imports, which of course China is not part of the sanctions regime. And we're seeing that again now, post-2022. European export control authorities are now much stricter, much more on top of it for monitoring the shipment of these goods to the Russian economy. So now Russia is sourcing them from China. But of course, as William will talk to you about later, Russia is also using complex sanction evasion networks through Central Asia, Turkey, and other countries. To repeat myself somewhat again, we mustn't forget that sanctions are not a new thing. It seems to be in the press and in the Western consciousness that sanctions are something that is hitting Russia now since the start of its invasion of Ukraine. But really, we have to go all the way back to the 2014, to the start of the sanctions regime from the European Union and internationally in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea. As far back as 2014, Russia, there was dual-use sanctions imposed on Russia relating to CNC-powered machine tools, which said that they could not end up in military hands. There were some very specific guidelines published by the European Commission stating the max power of these machines, stating that companies had to do their due diligence on Russian companies to ensure that they did not end up in military use. But the main problem of the EU sanctions regime, and in fact the international sanctions regime, is the lack of coordination. Enforcement was largely left to individual member states of the European Union, which meant that Russia, if it wanted to import this machinery, would go shopping for authorities that were a lot weaker in enforcing these sanctions guidelines, or those who sometimes even turned a blind eye. I can say that I'm now quite happy to see that this direct trade of machine tools has almost dried up from Europe to Russia since 2022, as the European Commission has really been putting the thumb on national authorities to ensure that they are enforcing these dual-use sanctions. Why am I investigating this topic, and why is this so important? Well, despite these sanctions, despite these dual-use sanctions, dual-use and even some military list items flooded the Russian market. They can be found in almost every military production site in Russia. I know, according to the War and Sanctions Project, that machine tools have been Western machine tools, some of the most high-tech ones, not ones that were bought before 2014, but modern ones have been spotted in over 300 or 200 military sites across Russia, and have been detailed and catalogued. The image you see on the screen shows that Russia knew what it was doing and knew its acquisition of these machines was illegal. You can see that it even attempted to blur out the logos on this machine. Unfortunately, some of the machine tools and the brands are quite recognizable. Importantly, Russia could not sustain its current level of military production without these tools. The shelf life of some of these machines can be over 20 years. So a machine sent to Russia in 2015 through some dubious means, or through the incompetence of either the machine tool manufacturers or retailers in Europe, can have a lasting effect. It is a fact that these machines are currently working on producing parts for Russian aircraft, for Russian weaponry, for a whole array of products used in Russia's military. And importantly, a lot of these shipments were not made through third parties. Some of these shipments went from major machine tool manufacturers direct to concerns with ties to the military industrial complex or its related suppliers. As I said, I've been researching this story for quite a long time, and I've been publishing stories across the European press on this topic. I thought we would just run over a few of these topics to see how these schemes worked in practice. I'd like to draw your attention to this image of a inconspicuous apartment building with a little cafe at the front. This is the address of a Bulgarian company, which I will not name, which was heavily involved in shipping machine tools to the Russian arms industry, albeit with a few steps in between. I believe his office was registered at his parents' address or parents' flat in this very inconspicuous building. This is a Russian national who ran this company, and he was also the owner of a company in Russia called ImportGenius. ImportGenius was one of the largest suppliers of machinery to the Russian defense sector. This is an investigation that ran in EU Observer, and if you search that title, you will find it, and you will also see the names of the companies that I talk about. I talk about the company names, so don't worry. I don't think that they're going to sue me. So I was analyzing some of the ImportGenius trade data that we have here in the bottom left. William will talk to you a little bit more about how we use this data and how you can apply it to your own investigations or your own research in the future. But I was looking at the shipments of certain brands of machinery. I think it started as an investigation into how Wenzel, so German companies, products were getting into Russia. And I noticed this unusual pattern of a Bulgarian registered company called 2M Trading that was shipping machinery to ImportGenius. So a simple step, and this is a step that the customs authorities in Bulgaria should have done, or if 2M Trading was trying to abide by sanctions, should have done as well. I went and I looked at ImportGenius. I ran its INN, which is like its company registration number, through the Russian public procurement system, and I had a look at who ImportGenius' top customers are. And interestingly, its number one customer, was the Tactical Missile Weapons Corporation in Russia, which is the largest producer of weaponry used currently in Russia's war against Ukraine, which is already quite a big red flag. We also have other customers such as Saturn, who were responsible for making engines, rocket engines used in missiles and aircraft, and even the Volkinsky plant, which is where nuclear weapons, intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, are produced, and a whole list of other unsavory customers. So through this network of this 2M Trading would conduct some rather innocent-looking trades with European machine tool companies. It would buy them up directly. On its website, it would only mention very vaguely that it was dealing with the Global East. And this company, 2M Trading, would export this CNC and CMM machinery over to ImportGenius, which, while on paper may appear to be two completely different companies, are run by the same man. And ImportGenius, through its military-industrial holding kind of network, would provide this machinery directly to military factories. Russian procurement data gives us some real clues as to how this all worked. I've given you a context here. We can see that it was acquiring machinery from the American firm Microview, somehow through Europe, and transferring them over to different military industrial plants. We can see that this machine, for example, on the top left, this Microview Vertex 341 machine was transferred from ImportGenius to the Volkinsky plant, which is the one that makes nuclear weaponry. And yeah, through the Russian procurement records, we can get a very detailed review of how these trades happened and the sums involved in this. We can even look back to the customs data and see the exact machine transiting or traveling into the country from Bulgaria. Sometimes we can get very, very lucky with our customs data. Some of them even include consignment numbers, as we can see in the bottom left hand of the screen, which sometimes even appear on the procurement documents, on the contracts drafted between ImportGenius and the military factories. Because sometimes when they were concluding these deals, the machinery wouldn't even be physically in the country. ImportGenius was so certain that the machinery would arrive in Russia and that these deals would be concluded that it could bid for tenders of machinery that it didn't even have in stock, and in the agreements later it would include the shipment numbers for the clients to ensure them that they would receive the machinery. So this shows just how certain these people are that the machines would arrive. And these trades were going up right until the start of the war. Now this company is shipping stuff through Kyrgyzstan and Turkey and other third parties. Here's another case study. This is one that I wrote in IRP Media, which is an Italian investigative media, a really great one. I'm not sure if we all speak Italian, so the translation of this article, this investigation, was called "Machines for Making Ammunition." Kind of made in Italy, under the Made in Italy brand, were used by Russia to arm its special forces. This is a real case in point of, if you don't do your research, especially in the field of machine tools, your machinery with your branding can end up in some very bloody and deadly industries, and it can be a real embarrassment. So this is the company. I won't say its name on this lecture, but a very unassuming office building in the north of Italy, which found itself integral to these Russian plans relating to the arms industry. I want you to take a look at this video and tell me if you think there would be any red flags for you as a machine tool maker. Would you be happy if your machinery ultimately ended up here? Now pay special attention to these red machinery and this innovation section, because this is clearly not Russian-produced machinery. This is machinery sourced from Europe, of which we're going to talk to a little bit more in a second, but I'll just let the video finish out. So this is really a worst case scenario. You know, this clearly is not advertising just for the normal civilian ammunition sector. This is clearly a company trying to position itself as a provider of armaments for the military sector. You as a machine tool provider would definitely not want to have your machines prominently featured in this video, and unfortunately we see some of this red machinery. I came to this investigation in a bit of a roundabout way. I was actually looking into this company, into the Ulanovsk cartridge plant, and I could not track those machines. I could not work out where those red machines had come from. So I looked at the company structure of that company, and I realized that they are owned, or they have a sister company, which is working in the civilian ammunition trade. It's called the Tula cartridge plant. Thanks to the ImportGenius data, I was able to bring it up, and I noticed some interesting shipments relating to machinery, machine tools, multi-position presses, induction machines, capsulating machines used for ammunition in size 308. 308 is a very high caliber precision cartridge, and I said, well, that's very strange. I looked in detail at the red machinery, and I realized that and I looked at the customs record and realized that these are Vicini machines. These were machines from an Italian company. Piecing together the evidence and doing some OSINT and looking closely at the screens, eventually we saw, oops, the Vicini logo, as you see in the bottom, was written on these machines. So how did they end up there? Well, obviously, this is likely a case of error. The Vicini, who does not exist anymore as a company, it's been swallowed up by another company, saw this order come through for so-called civilian ammunition producing. Whether it got a permit, an export license, as it should have done from the Italian government, we don't know. They refused to tell us. And the machinery went and left for Tula. We can even see that the machine control panels have the Tula branding on, but ultimately they didn't stay in Tula. They ended up getting shipped over 11.5 hours away to a different site, Ulyanovsk. The Ulyanovsk plant is one of the leading producers of high-caliber munitions for the Russian army. So, oops, this is the dangers of a lack of due diligence, and our partner Roman will talk a little bit more about that in a second. And yeah, this is really the worst case scenario for a company. All of a sudden, your company is listed by name in official Russian Department of Defense plans, and even here the statistics show that your machines were used to produce at least 223,000 rounds of high caliber ammunition, and we even have videos of this type of ammunition being used in the war in Ukraine. So this is really the consequence of the machine tool trade to Russia. I'm now going to cut over to the part of the presentation which was taking place in the press club. We're going to lose a tiny part of Roman's presentation, for which I'm sorry, but he really presents us some fascinating case studies. So I will cut over to to the live event, and I thank you for joining me in this hybrid format. Thank you.
State entities which like have their history since the Soviet Union, basically. But this is like another our article which we published last week about the not only basic production of the weapons, but also the companies in Rostech which seem to be civilian. However, they provide the services to the military industrial complex. Some of them provide services of the supplies, other work as the like hotels, as the education things for children and the students in order to incorporate them in the military structure. So a lot of them are like actually part of the Rostech and being like additional social infrastructure of Russian military industrial complex in order to invite more people and provide them social benefits for joining the military production. When I talk about non-Russian companies, a good idea is to check the government's alerts, like the BIS, as the European Commission launched FAQs here, because in those governmental alerts, they try to update the schemes, to update the places of sanctions evasion, to provide some the most useful items for the checking on the companies from third countries. For example, like if we talk about the machines in this investigation, which we published a couple of months ago, about the deposits of some minerals of critical metals in Russia. And it was a topic about that Russia is also dependent on critical metals for its military production. It is like dependent as on China and on the Western technology, because Russia is not able to produce enough technology, machines, in order to develop the deposits of tantal, of like wolfram and other critical metals for military production. That's why they try to import those technologies from the Western countries through, for example, Turkey, and in order to develop the deposits themselves. That's why it is also like it is another topic of the machine tools, actually, because Dylan told us about the machines which help to produce some elements from metal. In this topic, we are talking about machines which help to develop the deposits, which are used for the minerals to be like extended, yeah, from the ground. And in this case, Russian companies which work in this field, they also like publicly tell that they are in lack of the technology in order to develop the deposits, and it is one of the weak points for them at this period of time. A good question is to understand how to analyze whether not only entities are connected to the military, yeah, but whether the goods might be connected or help to enlarge Russian military industrial complex. Because the sanctions are very slow in their analysis of the dual-use items. The CNC machines, yeah, it is one of the examples when the EU sanctioned like a burst of them just in 2023, like not before. Like the spare parts, some liquids, some other components of the CNC machines. And a lot of items actually could be used for the military purpose. And the strategy of the war is that you never know which items would be used next, because, well, I again refer here to the FPV drones, which are very cheap, very small type of drones, which were used for sports mostly before, but during the full-scale invasion of Russia of Ukraine, the FPV drones became weapons because the soldiers just attach some explosive things to this cheap small drone, use the like glasses in order to see the where the drone is flying, and this technology is being developed. Now they are using some cables in order to work with the radio electronic warfare in order to be more effective in these new types of weapons. Yeah, and this example of the FPV drones is a good example of how technology from civilian becomes military one. And in the system, when we have dual use lists, which should be improved by some special governmental bodies around the world, which has to analyze and make these results. It is a very slow process. And of course, we have to improve it. But at the level of businesses, it is a lot more easier work to do because some of the items might not be yet on the sanctions list, but they might be used for the military warfare affair. And one of the databases which can help to understand which items are used in the Russian weapons is the database which is named War and Sanctions. It is a Ukrainian governmental database which contains information about items which were found in the Russian weaponry. Mostly, it is now about components as the microchips in the missiles or the drones, but it also has a lot of other information about the sanctions, and the not very obvious types of the involvement in the warfare. For example, if we talk about machine tools again, the War and Sanctions database contains the information about the machine tools which were found on the Russian military sites. And well, it is told that the number of machines on this website is like 1,200, and they are located at nearly 200 factories in Russia. The database here has the links usually to the open source data so that everyone can check the links, like the Dylan again mentioned the video, how the journalistic investigations analyze the usage of machine tools, they spot them in the video. Here, the logic is the same. They also provide the link to the videos. They provide procurement documents. They provide some other information of like about the factories, the connections of the factories with the supplies, the connections of the factories with the weapons. And it is a very useful tool in order to understand how to some types of machines can be like joined in the production side. And I also wanted to come back here about the common high priority items list, which is actually the list, like one of the sanctions list, which might be useful for the checking of the items. It is not the full like list of sanctions, but this is the list which J7 countries like think that those items are the most important, and they are mostly shipped to Russia from third countries. So J7 countries propose this list for the third countries to check and ban from the ban the export of those items from third countries to Russia. So it's like might be a good idea to check the HS codes which are located there, because it is a lot more easier than to check the HS codes in, for example, EU sanctions or the US sanctions, which have like tons of documents, tons of files with different formats. Here, there are a small number of those HS codes, so it is not full, but it also contains the CNC machines, and it might be a good idea to have a look at it. So, thank you for your attention. I'll be here then if there are some questions.
Directly to the
I cannot hear you.
can you
if
turn
it
the mic back on?
the question.
Because what's on the whatever's the mic for the press club.
Well, I don't know if you can hear us now, but thank you so much,
I can.
Roman, and we will go straight now to the ImportGenius presentation.
Cosmos? That's on the main computer of the press club. Okay, it's not on here. It's on the press club one. If you need it there, then I'm gonna have to come over. If you go onto my, sorry about this. If you go onto my browser, please. Left, yeah, no, left, left, yes. And go onto my drive, top left-hand corner. And do the refresh the page. And do that one, and yep, there we go. And put it onto present mode, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems like our colors have gotten a little bit fried in this process, so please excuse me for that. Thank you all for being here today. My name is William George. I am the Director of Research with ImportGenius, and I'm here today to talk about how you can work with customs records to map networks that are used to evade sanctions and bypass export controls, and then talk a little bit more in depth about ways that granular customs records can be used for all kinds of journalistic activities. I'm going to give you a little gesture like this. All right. So I'll quickly speak a little bit about ImportGenius. So ImportGenius was founded in the US in 2006. It is the only privately owned provider of this kind of customs data in the US. Our competitors have recently been acquired by major publicly traded companies. And so we have about a little over 45 employees at the moment, and they're spread out across the world. We are, we've been in business for 17 years and have data which covers granular movements of goods. These include information on the counterparties of a transaction, the buyer and seller, the value, the description, HS codes if available for actually at the moment, over 23 countries, and we're consistently updating that number. Oh, this has gotten a little bit fried. This should have been a map of the world, but you can still see the countries here. So yeah, so let's look at aerospace supply chains. The joke here, of course, is that typically aerospace supply chains where you would sell directly to your customer, or you would sell through a third-party parts distributor, but now, because of sanctions and the strong demand for these export-controlled goods in Russia, these very complicated networks have sprung up.
So if you go to the top right, there's a little glasses. Click on that, and then turn off.
Oh,
no,
is it
up. No, just turn it off. Top right, top right. There you go.
That's what happened.
There
Okay.
you
Okay, excellent. All right.
And then
Thank you. That's a very helpful. It still doesn't look great.
still don't see it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's move to the next slide here. So what you can do is you can take detailed customs records for numerous countries, and you can layer them on top of each other to figure out the different stops that these goods take as they're being shipped out of the U.S. and then, in many cases, through Turkey, through Dubai, through Thailand, through Kazakhstan into Russia. And there's great value in using customs records for one country, but the more you're able to layer on top of each other, the more details you're likely to get that can help you piece together the entire evasion network. And this can be very useful as a journalist if you're trying to figure out, which trading partners are enabling this activity.
So, one short question in terminology. What are granular movements of goods, like details, or what does it mean?
Yes, so when I say granular, I mean you have UN Comtrade data, which provides you with statistical top-level details of trade. That'll give you at the HS code level, and we'll talk more about HS codes in a second here, overall, basically like categories of goods and dollar values. This allows you to look at each individual shipment and figure out details about each shipment. So you're actually looking at the container or the sub-container level, or like individual shipments of planes, and you're able to get details that are sourced from what are called the bills of lading. So we'll get to that in a second here. This is just looking at how The green box are details we received from Turkish customs records. The blue box, details we received from Russian records, and the red box, details from Kazakhstani data. And so by combining them, we were able to build this broader network. Next slide, please. So yes, what data are we working with? Yeah, so bills of lading are sort of like the atomic unit of trade. So these are documents that are issued for any shipment of goods from one country to another. They are also issued, internally within countries. But for our perspective here, they tell you who the buyer is, who the seller is, the HS code, there's a product description, addresses of both parties, weights, values. And these things are used by the shippers to understand what they're shipping, and they're used by customs authorities to understand how to impose duties and tariffs and track goods entering their countries. So our data, ImportGenius data, reflects data sourced from these bills of lading that are then collected into broader customs databases. So in some situations, we do actually have the paper bills themselves that are used to generate this data, but typically what we get are the next step in this chain where that data has been aggregated by customs departments.
Question.
Yes.
During the Cold War, there used to have been a transit export, which means a triangular export in the destination has been confiscated or changed or corrected in an illegal manner. How far are you successful tracing all these lessons learned?
So this is an attempt to work through situations where trade is being obscured.
Right.
Yes, and so
Belgium and North Africa were the main hotspots those days.
yes, right now we've noticed Turkey is a major hotspot. The Maldives were cropping up early. Thailand, the UAE typically are new ways that goods are shipped. And in many cases, the producers of the goods have no understanding of the end users. And we'll get into that a little bit here in a second. But yes, absolutely agreed. This is a very significant puzzle, and it's something that we are working on unraveling by leveraging all of these different sets of data, because every time a document is submitted and customs has to process something, there's more likelihood that someone who's trying to cover something up will make a mistake and will accidentally disclose information. If it's only, one time, maybe they're pretty good at covering that up. But the more points of potential failure there are, the more likely they will eventually uncover details that are useful for an investigation. And so our countries of interest here, right, this is based on data that we have. I'll tell you that in a second. So we've got excellent data for Russia through mid to late 2024. We have good data for Turkey for a similar period of time. And then Kazakhstan, we have excellent records for. Indian records are very robust, covering imports, exports, everything we've discussed here. And then Uzbekistan, we also have solid data for. So these are countries of interest for analyzing shipments into Russia. Obviously, this would shift depending on the goods you're trying to look at. If you're looking at Iran, you might have a different basket of countries that you're focused on. And so why not the US? If we're trying to imagine parts manufactured by, say, US defense contractors, you'd think that a good first step would be looking at US exports. But unfortunately, the US is not very transparent when it comes to air freight shipments. They are very transparent for maritime, anything on boats. This goes back to the Tariff Act of 1930 when this was codified into law. But since then, we have moved to having 50% of our trade value by dollar value shipped via air freight, and that is not yet disclosed. ImportGenius is working on correcting this with a bill called the Manifest Modernization Act, which is actually had been introduced into both chambers of Congress in the US. But until that is passed and implemented, we will not have visibility. So that's why we are not able to work with US exports for this, because these are typically air freight shipments. If they're valuable microchips, if they're really high dollar parts, they want to go somewhere quickly, they'll be on planes. And so also, why not the EU? Like similarly, we could look at exports by major EU companies. Similar situation, but with actually even less transparency. So granular trade data, as we're discussing, does basically not exist for Scandinavian countries, EU companies, and Australia, New Zealand, Canada. We're seeing increasing transparency in the UK. And you can also do some good freedom of information requests there, but that still will only disclose the import side. You will not see the non-UK party to the shipment. All right, so let's do a little puzzle here. So let's imagine that you're a US-based aerospace parts reseller, and you get a request from a Turkish buyer. Maybe you haven't heard of these people before. They reach out to you, and they express interest in buying Airbus aircraft parts. Now, we now know that this is a sanctioned company, but they were only listed on October 30th of last year. So maybe this happens in the summer. Well, you still need to figure out, what you should do in this situation. So, one thing you can do is you can check their Russian and Turkish customs records, and so by doing this, you'll see that they show up in the Turkish records as being a shipper. They show up. These are Turkish export records. They're exporting to a company named Turboshaft FCE. I selected a couple examples here. In one case, they appear as shipping to Iran. In one case, they appear as shipping to Russia. Another, they appear as shipping to the UAE. And then you can go down. I mean, that alone would be enough of a red flag that if you, as someone doing know your customer work, saw that, you would immediately not sell. But if you just want to, out of investigative curiosity, figure out what's happening next, then you can go connect this to the Russian import records, and you can see that this same company, Turboshaft FCE, over there on the shipper column, is shipping to S7 Airlines in Russia, which is highly sanctioned. So this is one of those routes. So yeah, so now we've discovered the real intermediary in these shipments. And I'm not going to go into details here, but they have now been, actually what we're seeing is that this activity continued even after this action was taken. So they're still attempting to move goods into Russia. So here is an example of the kind of chart you can build up using overlaid customs records information. And we have the US companies that wound up selling, and we're not saying that these US companies were aware of what they were doing, but once they see this pattern of activity, they should not engage in these sales. We can say, though, that this the Turkish company, which is now sanctioned, was selling to Turboshaft and Turboshaft's other identities, and those goods were then winding up at a number of sanctioned parties. And this is the kind of chart that, with a little bit of experience, is very satisfying to build and can really help with chasing leads and building out a narrative of how goods flow from initial manufacturer all the way to end user.
And if I could just detail as well, the same kind of schema, the same kind of schemes is what's used for machine tools for this equipment used in the military industry. This case of aerospace parts is just one example. This is definitely the case for machine tools, and is what we're looking into in our investigations. We'll talk a bit about that later.
Yes, so now if you're doing this work yourself, and you, we'll talk about this later, but I'm happy to give everyone in this room access to this data at no charge. These are columns to focus on. So the buyer and the seller, these are the names of the parties involved in the transaction. Then all the columns in this data containing cargo information. So cargo origin, which country it initially came from. You'll have the destination country as well. Depending on the database you're working with, you can have further columns telling you which countries it's moved through. In some cases, just looking at the Russian records will tell you where it came from, where it was shipped through, and where it wound up. But often the Turkish records or the additional records will give you more steps on that chain. Then you have the product description in detail. And this is very valuable because it can have parts numbers. It can have all kinds of extra information, since that's up to the shipper to fill out. Whatever they think will be useful in the transit of the goods will be there. The HS code, which is, well, I have 2 more slides talking about that. And then you have the producer name and trademark. You never know what you'll find there. I was looking at Russian exports and imports of antiques over 100 years old, and I found shipments linked to Fabergé and Stradivarius, both of which have wound up being reported on at this point. But you never really know what you might find. There's a lot going on here. And so, yeah, you can structure searches from any of these starting points. You can identify a company whose goods you know are winding up in Russia. You can start with sanctioned entities. You can start with categories of goods, and you can work in any direction. And you can start layering these to narrow down what you're looking for. So HS codes are a wonderful multi-purpose product nomenclature. They span over 5,000 commodity groups, and they are numbers that allow you to rapidly identify precisely what good you're dealing with. So here's an example of an HS code. So the first 2 digits are the chapter. This tells you that you're working with electronic machinery. The next 2 digits are the heading. So now you're working in circuits, subset of machinery. The next 2 are the subheading. So now you know you're working with processors and controllers. And the first 6 are a universal standard. So any country in the world, their customs department, you can use those 6 and you'll get anything that falls within that from those numbers. Beyond that, it's up to the countries themselves to determine specifically how they are differentiating goods. So this is actually a Russian HS code for monolithic integrated circuits, and that's what the final 2 digits recommend. The 90 indicates an other category, and then the 10 places them in the monolithic circuits category. So here's some resources if you're trying to work with HS codes, which can be confusing. If you're working with US HS codes, you can use the US government website. You can also use the cross-customs ruling database system. Anytime an importer wants to question a determination by customs as to how a good should be classified, they can submit a complaint there, and then all of that becomes public. And that can be very helpful for working on edge cases and confirming exactly where something that doesn't seem like it fits smoothly within a category can go. And you can take that ruling, and even though it's not necessarily something that will be the case outside of the US, you can use that for a first point to figure out HS code categorizations outside of the US. And there are websites which claim to have HS code definitions. Those are frequently reliable. They're not always reliable. And because this varies country by country, it can get confusing. So I recommend looking for what are called customs gazettes sometimes, or HS code guides. And these should be published by governments themselves. And they'll help you get from 6 digits to 8 to 10. And yeah, these can be easily found for the countries listed here, but they should exist for any country with a customs department.
A quick warning that Russia internally uses, some countries internally use different codes as well. So if you're looking into the procurement, you may not see products filtered by HS code. For example, in Russia, they use something called OKPD2. So it gets a little bit more complicated if it's to do with internal trade. So it's just from my experience.
So I have some examples here of successful journalistic outcomes doing exactly this kind of mapping that ImportGenius has been heavily involved with. It's always very gratifying when we can see real-world impacts from this data because we're very close to it. We see it all the time, and we understand how exciting it is, but sometimes it seems that there isn't enough use of this to make sure that bad actors are not able to engage in the activities they're partaking in. So the example to the left is tracking microchips actually going through Hong Kong into Kazakhstan into Russia. The middle was this was an investigation into a company that was set up in the Netherlands that was set up by a Russian businessman using executives he sort of recruited. He managed not to face prosecution, but his sort of patsies were arrested. I haven't checked in on the process of that, but yeah. And then the far right one was one of our first forays into aerospace export control work, where we just looked at our data and said, hey, look at all these Boeing, Airbus, et cetera, parts that just show up clear as day labeled Boeing or Airbus and are still flowing into Russia. And then we worked to figure out exactly how that was happening. 2 more quick examples. This one combined reporting on the ground where microchips were recovered from specific missile impact sites in Ukraine. And we were able to, working with the journalists there, figure out specifically the part numbers, the model numbers, and then track those flows through entities in Hong Kong, through entities around the world, into Russia. This was excellent work by Stephanie Baker and a really just gut-wrenching story. And this is a different category here, but we were working with African customs records, as well as Russian and Turkish, to track down a wide variety of Wagner-linked shell corporations and figure out how they were engaging in resource extraction in a number of African countries. We were able to track the mining equipment that they were sending out of Russia or sourcing into Africa. Unfortunately, we could not track the diamonds coming back out, but I think that's because it's much easier to smuggle diamonds than it is to smuggle excavation equipment. So what else can we do with trade data? You can do forced labor investigations. You can do health research. We have worked with newsrooms to track tainted medicines manufactured in India. In certain cases, we found cough syrup that had antifreeze in it that was being distributed through Africa and Central Asia. And then you can figure out how much of that is now on the market and help identify areas where that needs to be intercepted. You can figure out what's happening in events of trade disruption, like the closure of the Red Sea or the US port strike that happened in the fall of last year. You can also do a lot of tariff work. You can do this on a very micro level. You can figure out how an individual company's supply chain might be impacted, but you can also look at broader markets and countries on a country-by-country basis. You can do all kinds of anti-corruption work because we're looking at what's being shipped internationally, and very frequently assets have to be transferred. So you can see yachts, you can see cash. Large enough shipments of cash can sometimes just be declared as banknotes and moved in pallets. Same with pieces of art, the violins I mentioned earlier, antiques. And then you can also take macro level customs records like UN Comtrade data or US Census Bureau data, China, Japan, they all publish things like this. And you can identify larger players by name inside of these patterns of statistical data if you know what to look for. So for instance, maybe there's a zip code in the US that's producing a lot of lumber, and you figure out there's only one lumber plant in that zip code using this, then all of those shipments that you can see in the statistical data have to be linked to that player. And on and on. Honestly, the more we work with this, the more we discover you can do with it. So how can you get access to it? Well, I'm happy to say we can give it to you for free on a project-by-project basis. And we can also do custom data pulls by request for you. So you can email me at this email address here, and I will do my best to talk to you about what we can do and get it to you as quickly as possible. If you're an NGO, we do research partnerships. We will work with you to develop tools using the data, and you can also buy the data. And then if you're a commercial user, we have many options. But that's not quite relevant to this room at the moment. All right, thank you.
We will finish up. If we go back to the main presentation, there's something quite exciting we'd like to announce today. Yep, go ahead.
Can we ask a question?
Yeah, well, go ahead, sure.
I'm a journalist from Belgium, so obviously I would be interested in, bringing about Belgian stories with the relevance for the public. If I listened well to your presentation, is it then correct that I would start, once I have this access, looking at Turkey and the Emirates, for instance, and then going back, which were the Belgian countries that shipped computer chips, and then if I'm lucky, then that same country in Turkey also exported to Russia, or is
Yes.
that how we would
Do
do
you want to take that one?
That's how you would hope to see it. Unfortunately, we don't have data for the Emirates. We would love to get that data, but that is not going to be a transparent market, I think, for the foreseeable future. But yes, so you take the data that you can get and you figure out, I mean, a good place to start would be to look at shipments by HS code that have Belgium as country of origin or are linked to countries who do business in Belgium, and then see if you can find those traveling through countries such as Turkey and into Russia.
I can't say the company names, but if you look in the standard about, I can. There's a specific investigation we did into a company called Capvidia. I went with the standard, who was sending millions and millions of euros worth of parts to the Russian missile industry. And yeah, you start from the Russian custom records and you go backwards. And a lot of time you'll be surprised that you find direct transfers. A lot of time you don't need to make this huge network of overlapping authorities. A lot of the most interesting trades are direct. Of course, you have to ask William a bit nicer to give you the access to all the different data sets to track the whole thing. But sometimes not necessary. For me, in my work I do for tracking the role of Belgian companies in the Russian supply chain, it's with just the Russian records. So you can do a lot with even just one data set. If we go to the next slide, there's something important I want to announce today. So I'm currently working on a project that's been sponsored by the Journalism Fund. I'm working with a team of journalists from Belgium, from Ireland, that's me, Ukraine, Russia, and Spain. We are, with the collaboration with ImportGenius, going to be making available to journalists a most comprehensive data resource for making stories and series relating to machine tools. This will be a resource which you do not need to be a data journalist for. If you're any type of journalist, whether it's a traditional correspondent or reporter, you will be able to use this and you will be able to find your own stories to do with this topic. Next slide, please. Just to show you that, we're not messing around. I thought I'd just do a little quick scroll through to show. This is just one page of data. We have several dozen more. So there's a lot of data involved in this, and
Over
a lot of
a million records, right?
We so part of the process. I understand how this project started. I've known William for many years now. We had a close relationship. I said I wanted to do something a bit different with the data. We made a pool of the data for all the HS codes that are relevant under the EU sanctions for machine tools. Machine tools is a big category, as I've talked about. It can be robotic arms, it can be things like lathes, CMM machines, non-destructive testing equipment. It can be all sorts of different equipment. We pulled all the HS codes and pulled the complete data picture for that. We've even actually added data to that to try and capture stuff that might have fallen through the gaps, like specific traits about HS codes. So now we have a very comprehensive data set. That was something around 8 to 9 million lines of data. Now, we're not going to give you 9 million lines of data because most of it is, unfortunately, junk. Most of it is parts for checking the pressure of tires, or Jaguar sending parts from its European plant to its Russian subsidiary. This stuff for researchers is not so interesting.
We call this bycatch.
Bycatch, yeah, we had a lot of bycatch. So we're working with data consultants and by ourselves late into the night to comb through this data set. Next slide, I can show you. To comb through this data set to pull out just the most interesting and relevant shipments. That should be, if my current statistical modeling is correct, that should be around 1 million records. That's 1 million records of the shipment of machine tools between 2014 and 2022. Why 2014, 2022? Well, firstly, William's very kind, but I don't want to ask him for 2024 data. It's far too expensive. I also, the relevance of this project is showing that the current state of the Russian arms industry is a result of these European shipments. And even though these companies now say that they have absolutely no stake or interest in Russian business, it's completely not true. They are the companies that made Russia's military capacity. Without these machines, Russia could not make a single bullet, gun, or bomb. So, what will it look like for you as a researcher once you get this tool? Well, we will be hosting this data in a friendly dashboard. You will be able to log in through a URL with your username and password, and you will see in front of you a globe, and you can filter by, you can even say, I live in Brussels. Zoom in on Brussels and find every company listed on a map that has ever sent a machine tool. You'll be able to hover over the company and see the route that good took, which factory it ended up in, and what weapons are used to produce there. Or if it went to a wholesaler, you will see what clients that wholesaler worked with. You'll be able to filter by good type. You'll be able to filter by year. You'll also be able to manually browse the data. You will be free to use the data as you want, as long as you credit us. We would ask you to credit the project, and there may be a basic terms of contract that has to be signed. But besides that, you're completely free to use it. You can export it. You can make reports of this. You can use this for micro research, which would be looking into specific companies, or you can use it for macro research and make some trends about how the arms companies in your country participated in making Russia's arms industry what it is today. Next slide, please. We have a bit of a basic mock-up at the moment, so this is a tool. This is the process of the project. Is that the data cleaning takes massive amounts of computer power, takes massive amounts of human resources. We have almost finished creating this cleaned data set. The UI is next, so excuse me that it's not the most promising mock-up in the world, but that is our next step. But just to give you an idea, this is a very basic mock-up we made. You'll be able to filter over the destination companies and see the firm. You will be able to enrich the data from there. So we will have some APIs built in, which will show you some corporate information, show you ownership data, may also show you what procurement they're doing and where their goods go to. In the case if it's a military factory, we shall show you, we'll probably link to the war and sanctions and show you videos of machinery inside that plant. So there's all sorts of things that we are trying to implement. Hopefully we'll get all of them. Next slide. And same goes for the origin firm. You'll be able to see what kind of goods were shipped, about the company. You'll be able to zoom in on your map. It should be quite swish and fancy. This is just really a rough mock-up. This is a working mock-up, by the way. It's a hosted site, but the data in it at the moment is just test data. So yeah, I'm not going to give the access to that. Keep going. Oh, back one. Yeah, so we're not a project that's going to operate in a vacuum. We're looking for people who want to be involved. There's several ways to get involved in this project. We are looking, this is for people from media organizations. We are looking for organizations who are willing to be early adopters of our resource, which means you will receive the tool before other newsrooms or before other freelancers. The tool will be released sometime around in August, and we will be running a series of stories under the Tools of War brand. And we hope to make this a little bit like a mini Panama Papers in a way. We want to have this brand it's like an open brand that anybody can use, and anybody can get involved in. We don't have any plans to take cuts of publishing money. I think we have planning on a pay what you feel use for being access to the project. So that's the plan. So from September we should have a advanced set of media who can really capitalize and really make this brand their own. And then we will open up the doors to other researchers at a later point to continue the research, because with this data set, it can really open the doors to a lot of very, very interesting stories. And of course, yeah, you will be completely free to use the data, albeit with credit. So if we then do the next slide. Yeah, we are going to launch a newsletter, which will give some more details about the access to the resource. We will sign up on there, and shortly we'll provide links where if you want to be one of the early adopters or one of the newsrooms who wants to formally build a relationship with us and with ImportGenius also, we will make a form available for you to fill out and to get in touch with that. For those who maybe don't qualify or are not a newsroom or independent journalists, you can also follow this link, and in September you will receive access to sign up to the data resource. That's all. If we do one more slide, that's all from me. But I'd like us to stay in touch. So I leave on the screen here my email, and also I'm sure Roman will be happy to take your questions as well. So his email is there as well, and William would love to hear from you also. So thank you so much. I'm sorry for the technical problems, and if you have any questions, we'd love to take them. Otherwise, please stick around. There's plenty of croissants and orange juice. And thank you very much.